I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is Future Signal. On this episode, we are going to dive into what is the best HODL plan if war breaks out. Now, this is not financial advice. We are going to be talking about Bitcoin and gold in this episode. This is edu-tainment. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, I highly suggest you go check out YouTube. I'm going to leave that link in the episode description. Before we talk about war, I want to talk about the idea of Bitcoin being something that's hopefully going to deter future generations when there's mass Bitcoin adoption, future generations from ideally going to war. So one of Bitcoin's greatest promises, in my opinion, is to one day make war no longer economically attractive, profitable, therefore hopefully slowing down countries' desire to wage it, slowing down the war machine. In my lifetime, I have never been on the gold standard. I've never been around sound money. So this is kind of a theoretical thing for me because I've never seen it really, but I did want to call it out before we get into gold, war, Bitcoin. These are really serious topics, maybe the most serious we've ever discussed on Future Signal. So here we go. When I think about World War III happening, what would define World War III? I think would be a nuclear weapon. I don't know if we get to a point of mutually assured destruction where basically the US, Russia, China, Israel, Iran would all just start firing nuclear weapons. I don't even know also if Iran has nuclear weapons, but there's enough nuclear weapons to blow up the earth like 25 times over. It's some ridiculous number. So between Ukraine and Russia, maybe that could turn into something that would be nuclear, although I don't think Russia wants to nuke Ukraine. It just wants to take over that land. Israel, Iran, I don't think this would also get to a nuclear point, but Israel does have nukes. And I don't know if Iran has them, but Iran has people who would support them that do have nukes. India, Pakistan, I believe they both have nuclear weapons. This is not going on. The first two are ongoing right now. This is nothing right now that I know of, but these are two neighbors that maybe don't get along and that have nuclear arsenals from what I understand. South Korea, I don't actually know if South Korea has nuclear weapons, but obviously they have the backing of the United States. North Korea, I don't know if they have nuclear weapons either. Actually, I think they have like 6 or 7 from what I think, but I don't think that they can actually launch them to North America. So from a U.S. standpoint, we're not worried about it, but obviously from the border of North Korea down to South Korea, or down to Seoul, the capital, it's only like 35 miles. So I'm sure that they could figure out a way to get the nuke to Seoul and cause massive problems. So these are kind of some events. Like I said, I think it would be defined by nuclear war. Maybe it wouldn't be. But if it does occur, what would be the best to HODL? In order to kind of look at this, I'm really just looking at Bitcoin and gold. And that is because I think that they would be the most sought after commodities in a time of global war, and due to their fungibility and the fact that they'd be globally accepted, or really that their fungibility would allow them to be globally accepted, I could see that no matter where you are, if you're on the street and you have a wallet with some Bitcoin, whether it's on Lightning or Mainnet, or you have some gold, I think you'd be able to trade those and barter those if you were to get displaced by war. And obviously we're looking at this kind of from an investment standpoint. Where would you want to store your value? I think those things would continue to go up as people would put their wealth into them, because in uncertain times, people look for certainty. Gold for millennia has been certainty, and I think Bitcoin is now certainty for a lot more people. So gold or Bitcoin, in order to understand maybe what could happen in that situation, we're going to look back at COVID-19, Russia invading Ukraine, and then Hamas attacking Israel. These are recent events that allow us to look at the market, the gold market and the Bitcoin market specifically, and say, okay, how did this uncertainty drive people towards certainty, Bitcoin and gold? Okay. Now, we can't look at the 2001 internet bubble because Bitcoin didn't exist. And the 2008 real estate crisis was the catalyst for Bitcoin to exist. So we can't look at that either. So we're going to focus on these three. And I understand this is the hot hand fallacy, right? Just because you made 3 shots in a row in basketball doesn't mean you're going to make the 4th. However, it probably, maybe will tell you what your percentages are to maybe make the 4th if you've taken, 10,000 shots and people are like, okay, this person shoots 45% from 3, right? So with that said, I know that we can't use these crises to probably predict what's going to happen, especially in the event of a nuclear war. But I think these are moments in which the global markets kind of stopped and said, whoa, where are we going? This is an uncertain time. We need to go into certainty. And Bitcoin and gold have always been certainty. So let's start with COVID-19. COVID-19, I have the date March 11th because this is the date when the World Health Organization said, hey, this is going to be a global pandemic. And this is when the market started to be affected. So the price you see here is USD, gold for 1 ounce. So it went from 1643 up to 1700. And once again, this is just a year out. A year from the event, that's what we're going to start to look at, all right? Just so we can say what is going to be the best HODL plan over the year after potentially a devastating or a globally impacting event. Bitcoin's at 7,900. It went up to 59,000. That is an extreme, change in percent. Gold only went up 3.4%. Bitcoin went up 746%. You can see the ROIs there for 1 ounce of gold and 1 Bitcoin. Ukraine being invaded by Russia. So this is going to be the slide where we saw some negative action, which is also interesting, where gold went down by 4% and Bitcoin went down by 44%, or 10 times more than gold went down in a percent. Interesting. Israel being attacked by Hamas. The year after, gold would go up, for 1 ounce of gold would go up 1%. Bitcoin would go up around 64%, from 35,500 up to 55,000. You could see the ROI there on the right. Total, this is what this is look like. This is what this is looking like. And this is for the year after, right? From the event of COVID-19, from the event and the start of Ukraine being invaded by Russia, from Hamas attacking Israel. These are the numbers. So Bitcoin went up a lot, almost 750%. After COVID-19, Ukraine, it went down 44%. And then the Hamas attack, Bitcoin went up 64%. COVID-19, gold went up a year after, only 3.4%. After Ukraine was invaded by Russia, it went down 4.3%. And a year after the Hamas attack, Hamas attacking Israel, gold was only up 1%. Okay. So what does this tell us? This tells us that holding Bitcoin or gold for a year after COVID-19 and the Hamas attack would have left you up. It would have left you in profit, would you, if you wanted to have sold. However, if you had held, it should say, if you hadn't sold basically for the year after the Ukraine invasion, you'd be down, right? And we can see these numbers here on this slide, right? Positive, negative, positive in percent change, right? And it's interesting that both when Bitcoin was positive, gold was positive. When Bitcoin was negative, gold was negative, and vice versa for each of these events. But let's zoom out a little bit farther. I said we're going to, start with a year, and let's zoom out a little bit farther than 1 year. This is now looking at price action as of today, June 15th, 2025. And we're going to assume, if you see on the upper left quadrant, the Bitcoin price being 105,000 for Bitcoin, and 3,433 per ounce of gold. These are prices I looked up today as I was making this, getting ready to record right now. So they're the most up-to-date that I have. If you do that, and obviously you'll see the prices here, Bitcoin is up 1,320%, and gold is up 201% since COVID-19, right? That's almost 5 years ago, a little bit more than 5 years ago. Since Ukraine Russia invaded Ukraine, Bitcoin's up 244%. Since the Hamas attack, Bitcoin's up 295%. Obviously, COVID-19 happened. Then Russia invaded Ukraine. More recently, Hamas attacked Israel. So you're going to have the biggest percent change and gold change for gold and Bitcoin the farther you go. But these are very interesting numbers. So what does this tell us? This tells us whether you held Bitcoin or gold up into today, from the time that COVID-19 started, Ukraine was invaded by Russia, or Hamas attacked Israel. Either one of those three, you'd be better off. You would be better off than if you had sold, right? If you had held, you'd be better off. So HODLing is paying off here. We can go back and look at these numbers. These are from these moments where things stopped. And I think COVID-19 is one that you really want to call up, because that's really when the world started to stop. When markets, people didn't know what they were going to do. There were massive layoffs. It was a crazy, crazy, uncertain time where people were then looking for certainty. And I think that that's what we're trying to hit on. So HODLing definitely paid off if you had held from any one of those events up into current day. From COVID-19, it's about 5 years, right? Which isn't a long time over the lifetime of someone investing money, but it's good to say. And if you had held Bitcoin from March 11th, 2020 up until now, you'd be up 1,320%, which is kind of impressive. Overall, Bitcoin over gold. However, as of today, you would have been better off holding Bitcoin over gold. So yes, you would be up whether you held Bitcoin or gold. You would be up. You would be better off than holding either one of those. HODLing would have paid off either way. But when you look at the numbers, Bitcoin does beat out gold. Let's look at those numbers. So this is as of today, 6/15/2025. If you're watching this after this, but you have all of the percent changes. And what I've done is basically subtract the gold from Bitcoin. And the difference since COVID-19, you would be 1,119% more. it would be 64% more since Ukraine invaded and 123% more, better off, I should say, had you just had held Bitcoin over gold, okay? So I think Bitcoin is rising to the top. If war breaks out, Bitcoin might be better to have than gold for two reasons. One, the info we just reviewed. If you look at this slide, this is telling you that since these bigger events, Bitcoin has definitely, done better than gold over a long enough time period, okay? And then the other one is the following reasons, and I want to run through these kind of quickly. One is portability. If the world is, on the brink of nuclear war and you need to get out from where you are because it may be a target, because maybe you live in China, Russia, or the US, which could become a problem pretty quick, portability is going to be really important. You maybe don't want to be carrying around bricks of gold. You might want to just be able to have 12 or 24 words in your head, or just have your smartphone. Like most humans on the planet now have a smartphone. Portability. Liquidity. I think Bitcoin is just going to be better. You may not be able to access gold markets. Divisibility. If you have a bar of gold and you're walking around, how are you possibly going to divide that up? Whereas with Lightning or even Mainnet, you can send fractions or pieces of a Bitcoin. Permissionless. You may want to be in a place where you can exchange with anyone, right? Maybe not just someone who has access to the gold market. Now, people would say that you could give cash for gold or in barter for gold, but I still think the permissionless nature of Bitcoin is a little bit stronger than gold, but I'm down to be, leave a comment, thoughts on that. Scarcity, Bitcoin's more scarce. Since the last halving, Bitcoin has actually become more scarce than the amount of gold in the world per person, which is really quite great. Immutability, that's the wonderful thing about Bitcoin. Once I send Bitcoin to another wallet, I don't own it anymore. With gold, in theory, someone could, give me cash for their gold and then they could hit me with a club. Right? The wallet will kind of like separate that. Once again, I'm open to hearing different things here. And I think also being able to use the internet to use Bitcoin as opposed to if you had physical gold, that's another thing with the immutability and the transfer. And then that kind of brings me into the portability and the storage. I think it's so much easier if you have $100 million to save it in Bitcoin and be able to store it properly than $100 million in kind of an apocalyptic situation of World War III, nuclear war. Then you wouldn't want to be having $100 million in gold. It would put crosshairs on your head. And then finally, the global 24/7 market, being able to use the internet, being able to use the networks that would hopefully still be up in this situation. I think Bitcoin would be a little bit better. But my question for you is, what did I miss? What would you add or remove? And then what are you doing? When you think about war breaking out, or you think about a nuclear war, or maybe something escalating with Israel and Iran, where are you putting your money? Once again, these are moments of uncertainty, and in moments of uncertainty, people look to invest in certainty. And I truly feel that gold has always been that way for millennia, but I truly do feel, and if you follow this channel, you know that we are obviously very big proponents of Bitcoin, but I do feel that now in moments of uncertainty, Bitcoin is becoming more and more certain for people, especially over a long enough time horizon. So please let me know what you are doing. Leave comments below. I'm very interested to hear how people are thinking about this, whether it's Bitcoin or gold, or maybe it's both. You could say it's both. If it is both, you are going to, cut some of these potential gains. These are obviously looking at past crises. Doesn't mean that's going to happen in future crises. But if you go, Bitcoin and gold, you may be cutting down some of your gains. You're going to be diversifying, right? But that's where I think maybe going for Bitcoin might be better. But what did I miss? If you're watching this on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe. If you listen to this on a podcast platform, please go ahead and subscribe. Follow us on socials at Future Signal XYZ, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for checking out this episode.